Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season we'll be watching and discussing the Netflix adaptation of Liu Cixin's Three-Body Problem. This is Season 9, Episode 2, Judgment Day, covering Episodes 4 and 5. The hosts have all read the series and have watched at least up to this part of the TV show and have other experiences with the series. My name is Dan. I have watched the entire series, both the Netflix one, the Chinese one, read the entire book series a bunch of times, and read a lot of Reddit.
My name is Talia. I have watched the entire Netflix series, a smattering of the Chinese series, and read the books several times.
My name is Priya, and I have read all three books. I have watched the entire Netflix series and a couple episodes of the Chinese series.
A quick note about this episode and the show in general, and about the season of the show, is that we will be going over full book spoilers. We'll be trying to focus our thoughts around just this section of the story, but we're all very excited about the series, and we've all watched the entire series, so we'll probably slip from some show spoilers into our discussion. So if you have not watched the entire series or have not read the book series, probably just be aware that this show will contain full spoilers for both of those things. So a few items of follow-up from last time. First of all, sort of more about our website. I did a bunch of work to make it hopefully better to navigate. I added previous and next episodes and pagination, so it looks better on mobile. So encourage you to go look at it. There was another, I don't know if we mentioned it on this show, but there's always this pervasive question of why did they change the setting from China? And so I actually saw this article from Vulture where they explicitly say why they did it. So the quote says, or the question from the interviewer says, "I'm curious about choosing London as the primary location for the events of your adaptation. Why there?" David Benioff says, "Well, it's not Beijing because the contract always stipulated that this is English language adaptation. The Chinese language one does take place in Beijing. We are allowed to have enough Chinese to do the period pieces that are set there, but the show had to be predominantly English. So we knew it always had to be somewhere outside of China." So all the people on Reddit who are complaining are oh, it should be in China. That's why they can't do it. It's a contractual thing. And speaking of the show also, the good news is that it's currently, as of today, April 3rd, it is the #1 show on Netflix and has been for most of the time it's been out. There was a couple days where some Bible story for Moses was #1, but it's Easter in the US, or maybe not in the US, I guess everywhere. And so the Bible stories will kind of come to the forefront there because of that. But I think that's good news. The numbers, I don't really understand what are good numbers, but they had 15 million views. That seems pretty good.
Yeah, I saw those numbers too. It's the website that we have is also a great place to find summaries of the episodes. This came up this week. Someone was asking for, I guess, spoilers for Three Body, and we have all of our episode summaries, not just for the TV show, but for the books, and you can find all those out there.
All right. Well, I think let's just get into, we have a lot of stuff to go over for these two episodes. We're only doing episodes 4 and 5 for this one, but I think these episodes kind of wrap up the majority of the first book pretty nicely here. So let's get into it, and Talia is going to lead us into episode 4.
So in episode 4, Mike Evans meets Wenjie in London in 1982. Ye has made it out of Red Coast Base and is a physics professor, and Evans is running his father's oil company. Ye reveals that she sent a message from Earth to the Santee. Wade tells Jin that she must go to the meetup that she was invited to help catch the people that murdered Jack. Sure tells Wade that they have found Evans on a boat called Judgment Day, where we're shown there's a full community with children in school. Evans speaks with Sophon, who tells Evans that his enemies know about the meetup, but that they will protect them. Da Shi speaks with his son about his future. His son tells him that he's going to be an entrepreneur. Evans tells Sophon the story of Little Red Riding Hood. He tries to explain to them why the wolf in the story would lie about being the girl's grandmother, which prompts Sophon to ask Evans if he has ever lied. He answers ruefully that he tries not to, but then reflects that everyone does sometimes. Sophon pauses for a long time. The last communication she gives is to say, "We cannot coexist with liars. We are afraid of you." Afterwards, she falls silent. Jin arrives at the meetup in the country where Tatiana tells her that the founder will be there tonight. To Jin's great surprise, the founder is introduced as Dr. Wenjie. Ye gives a speech to the organization about how humanity cannot save themselves. but the Santee will come to share their knowledge with them. Ye acknowledges that it will take 400 years, but ends by stating, they are coming. Police break up the gathering. Ye tells her group not to resist, but Tatiana draws a gun, takes a shot, and an armed fight ensues. Jin escapes, and Tatiana is subdued by Da Shi when he shoots her in the leg. Will gets back home and looks at the book of fairy tales that was given to him by Jin. Still hiding his cancer diagnosis, he calls to tell her he's going to rent a beach house and invites her. Hiding that she is in an ambulance escaping the chaos, she tells him about the history of the Santee that she has learned so far. Back in the 80s, Wenjie and Evans visit Judgment Day. He shows her the communication that the Santee have sent him. Evans tells her that she has brought them hope, and they kiss. In the present, Ye is brought back to London for questioning. Wade asks her what is so important about Judgment Day. Ye tells Wade that the Santee are coming and that there is nothing they can do to stop them.
In episode 5, after interviewing Ye Wenjie, Da Shi speaks with Wade and tries to think of a way to get the data off of Judgment Day without giving the crew time to destroy the data. Da Shi tells Wade that Judgment Day booked a slot in the Panama Canal for next month. Da Shi goes to the Augie in their secluded location. He tells her that she needs to resume production on the nanofibers to help get the data from the people that killed Jack. Augie goes back to her office and tries to restart production. She is worried that as soon as she does, the countdown will come back. But when she turns it on, she doesn't see anything. At the cottage, Will sits on the beach and gets a visit from Saul and Mr. Pugh, who tells Will that Jack has left him 20 million GBP. On the day of the attack on Judgment Day, Wade, Augie, and Raj are in the command center. As Judgment Day approaches the net, they watch as the ship starts to pass through the net of nanofibers. The horrific scene of people being sliced by the net plays out before their eyes. Evans runs to the back of the ship to try to escape with the hard drive with the messages on it, but breaks his ankle and cannot escape as he is also caught by the nanofibers. The sliced ship runs aground. Wade, Raj, and Augie investigate the wreckage for any data that they can use. Wade finds the body of Evans and recovers the hard drive that he was holding. Back in London, the team tries to decrypt the drive, but is not having any luck. But then the drive suddenly opens with a mysterious file that is 102.31 PB called Sophon.cxl. Wade speaks with Ye Wenjie and asks her why the Santee allowed them to attack Judgment Day. Wade gives her a tape of Evans speaking to the Santee, abandoning Evans when they find they are afraid of them. Ye looks horrified but says nothing. Jin and Wade return to London and view the file in the VR headsets. They encounter Sophon. Sophon tells them the following. The Santee race is doomed because due to having a stable planet, human civilization evolves at a much faster rate. In the 400 years that it will take them to get to Earth, the technological advantage will switch. So their plan is to block human science so it cannot advance. The Santee use an unfolded 10-dimensional proton that they can imprint a computer upon, refold it, send it to Earth at light speed, and then communicate at faster than light speed using quantum entanglement. The Sophons can cause miracles like the universe winking and the countdown, and most importantly, they're always invisibly watching everything humanity does. Shortly afterward, across the world, every screen shows the same message. You are bugs. The Sophon unfolds and shows everyone on Earth a reflection of themselves in the sky, and a giant eye appears to indicate that they are being watched. In a remote village, Tatiana sees the eye in the sky and looks overjoyed.
All right, so I'm going to go over the characters who are mostly the same from last one, and I'll go over their book counterparts if they have them. So we have Ye Wenjie, who is Ye Wenjie in the books, Mike Evans, Will Downing, who is Yun Tianming in the books, Sao Durand, who is Luo Ji in the books, Jin Cheng, who is Chang Xin in the books, Augie Salazar, who is mostly Wang Miao in the books, Clarence Da Shi, Thomas Wade, Red Shi, who is Da Shi's son, who is a new character for this part, Tatiana, doesn't really have a book analog, Raj Varma, who is probably Zhang Beihai, Dasher, and then Mr. Pugh, who is the executor of Jack's estate. Okay, so like I said, a lot of stuff happens in these episodes, but I think let's, as we do, go over our general impressions of them. And I think we'll start with Talia.
Yeah, so these two episodes, more than the first three, made me do like stronger comparisons to the book, just about the pacing that I noticed and the added elements. We got like more of Tatiana, who, as you said, has no real book analog. I did enjoy them. I am curious to see how many seasons they're expecting, just because, like I said, it feels like they've finished book one and are already in the middles of book two and three. But I definitely enjoyed this watch and had lots of expectation to finish the next two. So certainly enjoyed them. And the most powerful scenes that I found in the show are actually in our episode three, in the next three episodes. But certainly seeing the nanofibers was a very visually satisfying experience. So I liked it. How about you, Priya?
I think these two episodes were when we get really to like the heart of book one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that the scene with the nanofibers was horrific, but it was I had just been so curious how they would film that, because like when I was reading the books, honestly, I was having a bit of trouble truly visualizing and understanding exactly what was happening. Like I knew that the ship was like sliced apart, but like um it's hard to visualize something invisible slicing an entire ship apart. So I think that the way that they displayed it, especially the point of view from like inside the ship, was really cool. Because you know, until you see like there's like this one scene where you see like these little cutouts that children have like put on the walls that are like just slicing in a straight neat line, and it's so chilling to see. So I think that scene, as disturbing as it was, especially in its aftermath, that they don't shy away from showing us. I think it was really well done. The meeting was really well done. That look on Tatiana's face, like little details like that, like at the end of episode 5, really chilling. And I think like to me, like Tatiana has sort of just been like a stand-in for that, you know, that cult mentality, like a physical embodiment of it, where, you know, logically speaking, like usually cults, what they believe in doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you can see where that fanaticism comes from. And I think she portrays that really well. So yeah, these episodes, I enjoyed that things got a little more fast paced, and like the stakes start to rise with these episodes. So I think for non-book readers and book readers alike, I think these two episodes were very captivating.
Yeah, I think episode 5 is always meant to be like kind of the big set piece. And like if you look at the ratings for the show, like they're all like I was looking at the IMDb ratings and they're all like 7.7, 7.8, that kind of thing, except for episode 5, which is like 8.8. So I think like people are gonna like look for the big spectacle and kind of gravitate towards that. And like everyone I've talked to, like who has watched the show, who's not familiar with the books, has like also said like, oh man, the Nine of February thing was awesome. Yeah, me personally, I have similar thoughts to you, Priya. I think they filmed it really well. The kind of horror that they instilled for Judgment Day when they're on the ship. I think there's like this theme of like invisible things that are coming to get you, and like this is another like the Sophons, right? They're like invisible things that are like that are after you, and you never know where they are. And so like the nanofibers like also doing that. You know, it's like this invisible wall that's coming towards you, and you see people murdered right in front of you from it. Was interesting. I thought the Sophon Creation scene, while compressed, was still well done and well explained. That's a really, really hard thing to kind of put into a TV show and explain it well and like have people understand. And I think I don't know, like talking to people, I think people did get it. What was going on. Maybe not like all the nuances of specifically like how a proton is able to unfold and that kind of stuff, but I don't really get that either. So, um, not a lot of people do.
I think it's similar. I think it's similar to how like shows will or movies or any sci-fi that is attempted to show like the fourth dimension and beyond.
Yeah.
Like no one knows what that looks like, so you have so much liberty to in how you portray it because it's like, well, okay, it could look like that. No one's ever seen it. No one will ever see it. So
Right. Right.
Prove me wrong.
Not to mention like 10 dimensional. Right. So, but yeah, I thought they did a good job of showing that.
I will agree with you, Dan. Like episode 5 was like the interesting, like shot in the arm, high drama, edge of your seat, like Sophon Creation, Judgment Day, and Attack. Like it definitely had more of a payoff than episode 4, but I did enjoy them both.
I was surprised they packed so much into it, right? Like they had
Right.
the Judgment Day and the Sophon Creation scene in like the same episode, which is like two of like the big massive parts of, of the books, right?
Of the entire first book. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and they like jammed like it was like not only like in the episode, but it was like in the last 20 minutes of the episode. So
I
like
know, I know. Well,
yeah,
I think Judgment Day felt like it had its pacing just because there's a bit of an alert. But oh my gosh, the Sophon Creation scene, like it's rushed through. It's like it's being told to Jin and Saul. These characters don't even have a second to like breathe. And you contrast that to well, we can talk about pacing a little bit later. But yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to put together in 20
uh,
minutes.
Jin and Wade, not Saul.
Oh my gosh. Jin and Wade. About that.
Like you alluded to, there's a lot of like missing elements, as book readers that we noticed, and I kind of wanted to kind of go over them rapid fire to, the things I noticed and to see if we missed like having them in the show or it didn't really bother you.
Shoot.
So I'm interested like what your perspectives are. So the first thing I noticed is like there's no mention of an ETO specifically, the Earth Solaris organization. It's like a big deal in the books, but obviously there's a gathering of people who are, on episode 4 where they're, where Yomagia comes out. But they're never explicitly called the ETO. I don't think I missed it personally. But how are you guys?
yeah, I kept listening out for it, and I don't think you missed it. I think it just wasn't in there, and I think it kind of speaks to what you were mentioning last time about how like there's also nothing. They don't really delve into factions either. So I think that they have steered clear of naming any organizations or factions, and I wonder if that will come into play in season 2 because if I'm not mistaken, for each wall facer, there's going to be a wall breaker, and wall breakers are members of the ETO. Is that correct? Am
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remembering correctly?
yeah. They're surviving members of the ETO, like whoever's
So they
left.
need, but maybe they have as much infrastructure as they need, which is just like people who can meet up in the game and talk about these things.
Yeah, I mean, people are still
Yeah.
around, and even in the show. I guess we'll talk about it next week. But
Like it's a little bit odd to not name it because like the ETO is very much there, and I felt like Tatiana basically is the human representation of ETO. But then you also like basically the people on Judgment Day, the people who gather when Wenjie speaks and introduces herself as leader of the organization. It's very much there. It's just not named as such, and it just like I wonder why. But the fact that it was there kind of doesn't make it feel like a missing element to me. It just feels like a missing name, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
One thing I will, yeah, absolutely. I'm fine with it not having a name as long as it exists. They really hammer home in the TV show how accurate the VR is. Like it reflects places that they're familiar with. It reflects the clothes that they're actually wearing. That will steal the wall breaker reveal of Bill Hines. If we get to see that character like simultaneously. But apart
mm,
from that, I think it's a pretty good conceit, and I don't miss naming it the ETO.
I think like in the I mean maybe I just like misremembering it or like maybe I just misread it, but like I always got the impression in the books like that the humans, like people connected to Evans, were like the ones that created the game. Like and but it had all the because he had all those resources, like the money resources from being the oil. So they able to like develop this like technology. And like the game was really good, but it wasn't like
We're getting into another of
yeah,
the like quibbles I have, which doesn't deserve to be as bothersome as it is to me. But I really feel like there's too much hand waving about alien technology in the TV show. It makes it seem as though the distance is not real. It's like, oh, these are probably pieces of alien tech. And they're like, no, guys, like they can't send like physical hardware here. It
right.
really does take them 400 years to get here. Launching a
Yeah.
proton is one thing, but like these were made by humans and programmed by humans. And I don't know that that's explicit to people who haven't read the book.
You make an interesting point because the VR headsets look like they are made from the same metal that we will see like the
And
droplets are
droplet.
made from. So yeah, that did kind of have me scratching my head because I was like trying to remember in the book, was there any way for them to have sent anything other
Absolutely not.
than
No.
Sophons to Earth, but there wasn't. So even within the show, it's like, oh, wait, like this is like nothing I've seen before. This tech doesn't exist
Like
on Earth.
there's no charging cable. Like
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
looks
Yeah.
So it's like this,
extremely
it seems like
alien.
it's made of like some, alien metal, which I think that's what they were going for. But as I was rereading book one, I noticed that like in the book, it's a VR headset, but there's also a suit that goes with
Mhm.
it
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
to explain how they're able to feel like the sensations of cold or heat or wind. So it's very much within the realm of what human technology could be capable of in the book versus this being very much in the direction of, well, the aliens have sent us this tech.
And that's just my what's what quibbles for me is
But
that
that's a very
a
valid
hard
point,
science.
though.
It's such a hard science novel. And one of the things it's really explicit about is like, we are going to try as best as we can to obey the laws of physics. So, like, we're not going to pretend that we can just shoot you a VR headset
Right.
in the realm of the possible. But I can, pretend that it's not really a big story point. I just wonder if it's leading people to think that the Trisolarans are doing more or the Senti are more powerful than they actually are. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, there should have maybe like on the hard drive that he got, there should be like a file of like this is how you would build a VR headset,
Yeah. Oh
like
my gosh, that
schematics
would
or
have
something,
been
right?
such an easy way, like a throwaway, like one-liner
Right.
that would have
Yeah,
soothed
because
all
yeah,
this.
the important thing is that like we built like humans built it, but like with the instruction from the Trisolar or the
With
Santee.
like
Yeah.
alien software, human actual construction.
But like the headset's not going to use the strong interaction force like the droplet does, right? So like because we can't do that at
No,
that
not
scale.
yet. Even at the end of the deterrence era, it seems like they only had like small pieces,
Yeah.
like hundreds of years away still.
All right. Well, the next thing that I noticed was missing was in Wenjie's speech at the during the thing is like they have the chant of like the world belongs to Trisolaris. It seems very iconic to the books, which was like I was waiting for it in the show. And I didn't have it, so I understand that I don't have it
I don't
because
like
like
the word.
it's not called it's not called Trisolaris. It's called the world of Santee, or I don't know what I don't think they even name it. But I guess I don't have it, but I did miss it a little bit. But I'm not like upset about it. But I did notice it. I noticed there. I mean, I'm sure you guys noticed too. There's a big set piece in the scene where the police take over the meeting, and there's actually like people with like miniature nuclear bombs that that Dasher actually like shoots and gets leukemia because of, and that's part of the reason why he hibernates.
Oh, you're
uh,
so on it, Dan.
yeah, so like we didn't have that. We didn't have that part. Like it was just a shootout. I mean, again, it's okay. Like maybe it's convoluted, and
Shootout part that I liked from the book is like when they have this really tense situation and there is a bomb that's going to go off, and then Dasha like looks at the girl who's I guess like a Tatiana in the book,
yeah,
some unnamed crazed cult girl, and is like, we heard from your mother. And she freaks out and drops it. And then later, like, wow, how did you know like about her mom? He's like, oh, I guessed. It's kind
Yeah.
of a cold read. Like, that's the kind of person like with mommy issues. And I just thought like that's when I really fell for Dasha's character. It was like in that moment. And I feel like he's not quite as beloved, although I have heard a fellow person who has read the books and enjoyed the series. He said Benedict Wong can do no wrong. So maybe he's playing really well despite that. But like I missed that little moment of Dasha just being like on the ball.
Yeah, yeah, that was cool.
I think that they've done a clear stylistic change to Dasha's character. I think that he is a lot less gruff and a lot more sarcastic in this adaptation of his character. I never thought that I quite minded it. I think that I feel like I agree with your friend. Benedict Wong can do no
Do
wrong.
no wrong.
This is going to be a catchphrase now. It's going to be a new jingle.
I got no problem with that. But I think Dan made a similar point that like Dasha is not a devil in this one. He's not as rough. He's still like a relatable, twangy, sarcastic character, but he's not quite as yeah, Wang Miao does call him a devil, even though it's no one has like complete blame for that decision.
Yeah, I think that was like a kind of also a pivotal moment in the books, you know, when he like among all like the generals are talking about this plan, he comes up with like this, you know, the plan to do it. And he still does it in this iteration, I think. But, you know, they specifically call him a devil for like thinking of such a coolish plan to like to get it. So I don't want to say I miss it, but like it just I noticed it. Just because it was such a big scene in the books, I think. And then getting on to the Sophon Creation scene, there's a lot that was missing there. So we do hear from the pacifist in the original message that Wenjie gets from that Santee, but we don't see in the Sophon Creation scene the perspective from that. And I get it; it's like cutting down time, and like there's a lot of like backstory and world building you need to do, and like you need to figure out how to show it. So I get why they didn't show it here. I'll say I missed it, but like I don't fault the show for not having it. I mean, because it was one of the cooler parts of the book when you actually like see when the perspective changes to the Trisolarans. You know that
Unbelievably cool moment. I always
Yeah.
imagined they would do that in VR in the constraints of a TV show, but man, they cut it short.
Yeah, 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 and you know, and similar to that, they also got rid of the experiment. Like they showed like the actual like process of the creation of the Sophons, and like I always thought like the failed experiment parts was so cool. Like when
Me too.
they accidentally did it in 2 dimensions, and all the lines fall down, and they accidentally did it in 4 dimensions, and it created a universe of race of people they needed to destroy. That part was also
I
was
also kind of liked, and this is like deeper book lore than anyone needs, but the war minister warning the princeps that like you need to watch out for this scientist. He's warning you about the wrong thing. Like he's telling you it's okay in 3, it's okay in 4. We're gonna get there. He's not even warning you that it could collapse to 0 dimensions, and then whoops, we've just created a black hole.
yeah.
And knowing the trouble that black holes get us into, I kind of liked, again, just like this evidence that this great and powerful civilization with the advanced tech, they're still like playing with fire here.
Yeah.
Sets up the dark forest really nicely if you understand that like they have enemies and fears and risks as well.
I mean, I guess there's like no reason we couldn't see that stuff later on. I think that's unlikely because this would be the place to put it. But who knows, right? Maybe you know we can still see it later. So I'll say like I miss it as a book reader, but I understand it. Like I'm not like I just like read tons and tons of comments, be like, oh, the show is unwatchable because it doesn't have this thing or this thing or this thing, right? I don't think
The
it's
show is not
Yeah,
unwatchable.
get over yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like there's people who online like you know, oh, like you know, oh,
The
geez.
Room is unwatchable. Come on now.
So yeah, I mean, the show is still good despite these elements missing, and it might be better for it. Like maybe it's more streamlined, and like we don't need 30 episodes to tell the story of book 1. You know,
Yeah.
we have 5. And
I did-
think
If
5's
the
okay.
room is unwatchable, why is it I have watched it like more than twice.
Honestly, same. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I've watched it once. I get that, but like watching it multiple times, I don't know.
Well, I watched it once in college, and then I had to watch it again with Sid. So that I
Oh,
think that's why.
okay.
Exactly, me too, Priya. I watched it once in college with a boyfriend at the time, and then it was like a social event, you know, as an adult with
It's an
other.
event. It's like one of those cult movies that you just
Is
watch.
that an event
Um,
movie? That seems like a very personal. Yeah.
And yet you're outnumbered, Dan, and yet you're
Yeah.
outnumbered on this very
I
call.
get. I mean, I also. I mean, I don't know if I enjoyed watching it. I appreciated the movie watching it, but I don't know that
I
like
mean,
it would be like a
it's just mesmerizing, isn't it? And
yeah,
this, now coming back to this show, which is very much not the room.
yeah.
Right. I did have a friend, like not a random stranger on the internet, but like a real living person who told me that they struggled to get into the show. And then they were describing like, oh, and you start a show and you want to multitask. So I'm getting up and I'm doing the dishes. I'm like, as it opens in the like, do you speak Mandarin? Do you think that you'd be able to like
Yeah.
pick this up from the room over? Like, this kind of feels like a personal choice.
Oh my gosh. So we had this hilarious moment where the show opens up and a few minutes in, Sid's like raising volume. I'm like, you can't understand what they're saying, even if it's louder.
I support Sid. He is right. And I will hear nothing against him. I do that too.
Okay. Well, the next thing we have is added TV stuff. So, we talked about stuff that's missing from the book, but there's also stuff that was added from the book. I think, Talia, you added this stuff. I'm guessing because I didn't add this stuff.
Yeah, I just feel like we spent a lot of time bouncing to the 80s, and I don't think it totally paid off. Like, I understand we need to set up that Judgment Day exists, and we need to learn that the Trisolarans the Santee have communicated back, but I feel like we spend more time there than we need to, and we like have this romance between Mike and yeah, I guess we find out why Vera's half white, and we do that, but it doesn't affect the story really. And like by the time we see it as an audience, we already know, for example, that the Santee have written back, so it's just a little duplicative
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. I think, yeah, maybe like a little bit too much time because there's what, three scenes from the
Mhm.
80s in the restaurant. And then, no, I guess just two, right? There's like the restaurant one and then when they actually went to the ship.
And then the ship one. Take that time and
Yeah.
pour it back into the Sophon. I'm
Yeah.
crabapple take on it.
But
And that
I did notice like the screen. I paused it when she was looking at the computer screen
yeah.
when Evans was showing her the initial thing, and it's just like a wall of text. But if you look at it, it's actually like it enumerates every civilization of the Santee and like how it's destroyed and how long it lasted, which is pretty
Did your
interesting.
wife translate that for you?
No, it was in English.
In English,
Oh,
I
it's in
think.
English.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah,
I've clearly forgotten that.
yeah.
Although Chinese is a very economical language if you do want to communicate a lot of things
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah. It probably went in faster.
Yeah, it absolutely would be. I do think that the listing of the ways that all these civilizations have ended is the cover that they need for one of the elements that I really liked in the book, which was skipped, which is really hammering home why the Trisolarans need to leave their star system. Because again, I feel like you see this race that can create a computer the size of a proton. You're like, well, they could just build a shield. Like they'll be fine against these chaotic eras. And then the big reveal is like there used to be like 8, 9 planets here, and
Oh
all of
yeah.
them have been pulled into these suns. And it's like it's again, it's this more foreshadowing that like it's nothing that your bunkers can protect you from. Like there's physical components which were too small to alter, like gravity. We can't change the fact that a trisolar syzygy would pull our planet down, regardless of whatever we build. And that like is more profound and like more horrifying to me uh, than any amount of heat or cold that they describe the chaotic eras as having.
Yeah, Sophon does mention during that scene, like like the world could be ripped in half or that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
so fast. That's all.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, that's generally my comment on pacing, is that some of these concepts are only that horrifying when you spend some time considering them. That's all.
And I think by the time like they're making this Sophon, like the planet's already like ripped in half, right? And like
Oh, the moon. Yeah. They're like, hey, didn't there used to be more planet, less moon? They're like, yeah, that moon is what used to be the planet.
yeah,
There's tri-solar civilization up there.
and they're more worried about like the planet falling into the sun because it's like it's obvious it's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm glad that they at least listed how all the other civilizations died. Added story elements. I just because there's so much more collusion between Jin and Wade and Clarence than there was between Wang Miao and Da Shi. I thought the removing Jin from the gathering was very, very obvious. Like they put down all the hostages and then they like picked her up and pulled her out of the room.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why Tatiana pulled out a gun. So that was like a little bit of a fourth wall moment. But I did really like all these reveals that we're getting in the shadows about Wade. And we get like glimpses of the high military grade spy and surveillance equipment that he has access to. And that's like funny and yeah, interesting.
I did like the actress Jin's actress like reaction to Wenjie being the announced as the leader. And like
Totally.
and like
Yeah.
that was like one of the bigger reveals for me in the books, like when when we realized like she's the leader of the ETO in that moment, right? And like that was like I think it's just as
But it's
impactful
only a
in the
reveal to
show.
the audience. So I'm glad that they gave us an audience surrogate for that.
Yeah, because like if you're, like you're paying attention, like in the beginning, like when they're talking about it, they still say he because I think they assume it's going to be Evans who's coming up and speaking. He's the
Yeah.
leader, right? I think Dasher also, says like, oh, he's going to be on stage or something like that, right? Like when he comes on stage, like it's never said that she or it's never hinted that it's going to be her, but then like it's supposed to be like really impactful when the
Yeah,
guy goes like Doctor Ye Wenjie, and then
who's the
like
leader? Is it a man or a group of men?
right. But yeah, Jin is like really, really shocked by it. And then like, even when she comes up to her and like speaks to her in Chinese, like she's still shocked. And I thought like her reaction was really good to, be the audience or get there. But yeah, it was not good police work to really obviously take her out and be like, we're going to get you safe. And it looks like there's another note for children on Judgment Day, the severed child foot. Yeah.
That was a lot to take in because I'm just glad they stopped short, like, because they did show us some people being sliced apart. I'm
Right.
glad they didn't go there. But they almost went there when they showed like a little foot, just like
Yeah.
a just severed foot, and that was very disturbing. But I think that it plays a great part in explaining the moral crisis that Augie falls into after this event. But like it gets to the heart of the matter that you can have this technology and it can be used to do tremendous good in the world, but it can also be used to commit great horrors. And it's I guess it's what any inventor has to struggle with or grapple with, that something that you create with good intentions can be used for such horrific purposes. And I think that visual, though perhaps unnecessary, does fit in with the mental decline that we will see for this character going forward.
Oh, you're so literary and like Oppenheimer. I just thought this is a disgusting episode for feet. I hated seeing the foot. I hated seeing him break his ankle. It was a
Oh,
foot-centered, foot-centered episode of gore. I hated it.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously, I don't think they should have shown children getting sliced up, but I do think they should have like leaned into more of Wade knowing that children were on that ship, just to kind of make his character that more. Like he has like this mantra, like only advance. I think that's later, but we know, he's like that. It's like advance at any cost, like win the war at any cost. And I think he mentions that like I know there's like probably 1,000 people on the ship, and I know that the pilot's going to get killed. And like 5 to 20,000 people died building the Panama Canal. So like, what's 1,000 more for the war against humanity? But like, I think if he had known and like held it in that that there were specifically children on that ship, would have made his character even more morally ambiguous.
Yeah, they don't give his character any teeth. At least they haven't so far.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to make him so unlikable yet, but like, we all know this is a book spoiler show that like, he's eventually going to try to murder Changxin, right? Or to
Is
Jin.
he though? Like maybe he'll just trip her up in a hallway. This is such a soft version of Wade.
I don't know. If he doesn't, we'll get into it next week, I guess, but the end part, like I think there's like setup of him. And we'll talk about it next week, I guess. I don't
We
want
will.
Yeah.
There's no Vadimos. We'll
Yeah, there's
talk
no
about it.
Vladimov. That I guess I didn't put that in my miss section, but I do kind of miss that. But that would be next week at 2. But
We can talk about it next week, I promise.
yeah, I was hoping that like yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about it.
Rehydrate coming out every week now.
Yeah.
So
I think like in general, like we didn't talk about Wade at all last week, which is interesting. I think we just had too much other stuff to talk about. So maybe now is a good time to talk about like his general impressions. I mean, I'm on record as a person who is against Wade, and I think Wade is an evil character, and I think in in the books, and I think he's meant to be an evil sociopath. That from the beginning he deliberately like sadistic towards Changxin by not telling him about Yin and Ming. Anyway, like he's like specifically like mean to her, and then he kills people, and then he tries to kill her, just to advance. But I think like you guys said, like his character is a little bit more softer in the show. He's not quite as evil. He's a little bit more ambiguous, but just more driven. That said, I like I think people really like his character, and I do too. I mean, I don't want to say I like him, but like I enjoy the performance of of his character, if that makes sense.
yeah, he's given more to do in episodes 6, 7, and 8, so I'll have more to
Yeah.
say when we reach there. As far as Judgment Day, I just find the character a little bit soft, but likable. Like I remember remarking to someone who hadn't read the books, like, it's actually kind of a divisive and unlikable character. They're like, "Oh, really? It seems
Yeah.
like they're doing something right." I'm like, "Yeah, it does seem like that."
Well, I think that they did weave certain elements of questionable morality in for Wade because I believe it was his character, and correct me if I'm wrong, who says, I in response to children being on Judgment Day, didn't he say something like, well, their parents betrayed the whole, human race and kind of betrayed them as well in the process.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like almost like dismissive of these like children dying. It's kind of almost like the argument that, well, they've been condemned to this fate along with the rest of us by their parents. So, either way, even if we hadn't done anything, there's only like doom awaiting them anyway. So that's kind of like, well, that's not accurate because, the conflict is 400 years away. So these particular children did
Right.
die
Well,
at your hands.
There's the crux of the problem. Do we
Yes.
invest in the now and think about the future, or do we ignore the future in order to live in the now?
And I think that really portrays Wade's philosophy in that
Right.
moment. Yeah.
Advance. I'm wondering now, like, how Scientology would avoid taking a victory lap, huge victory lap. Like, turns out we were right to live on a boat and be controlled by aliens. Like, huge apology needed from the world. This is just where my head's at. I'm sure someone's already drawn many more comparisons, but like the boat, oh God, what was that? Sea Org? Yeah, the early
Oh,
70s
yeah.
Sea Org.
They need
And I
to check for people who are in the ETO by using the e-meters, right?
Exactly. And I think, Priya, you brought it up just because you spoke about children, and in Scientology doctrine, children are adults in small bodies. So again, it'd be easier to like disregard them and count them in with adults when considering what is right and wrong. So yeah, Cadet Org and Sea Org is front of mind right now, but nothing else to say about Wade so far.
I think one last thing that I want to say is that whenever I look at him, I just see like Sir Davos from Game of Thrones, and I feel like there's like casting him in this role, casting Cunningham in this role is just it's hard to see him as a bad guy. So like if you had your conclusions formed from the book about what this character is. You are not a supporter of this character, or this is an evil character. I think that sometimes in shows, who you cast to play the character will have a lot of bearing on it. And there are many scenes where he comes across as extremely charming, and I think that kind of confounds viewers probably on what to make of this character, and perhaps that's intentional. I can imagine that being very much intentional because we
Yeah.
have a
It's
beloved
charming.
actor playing who we're familiar with.
I wish they would challenge his acting chops. That's what I'm saying. Like, he is charming, he is charismatic. He comes out of jail and already has like hundreds of followers who are willing to sacrifice a lot to be with him. So give him the morally questionable acts to play and actually use that charisma and charm. Like, I don't know. I think they should lean more into it if they're going to tell the story straight.
I do think that, there's a lot of setup for, the conflicts that we will probably see in season two, whenever we get a season two, that will perhaps, I think the scene has been set to allow for certain changes, for him to go further or lean further in the direction of moral gray area,
You're
or
so right.
yeah, or completely immoral decision making. So I think that the seeds for that are there. And also the seeds for Yun Tianming have been placed in his little canister.
Next week.
Getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't mention seeds without thinking ahead
Yeah.
to those seeds.
we're all thinking it. Okay, well, I think let's jump into talking about the conversation that Evans has with the Sophons, where they eventually like that's the cause for the Judgment Day to be able to happen at all, and why all this stuff starts happening is because the Sophons cut off communication with the humans because they become afraid of them, and this is almost like not verbatim, but like it's very like pulled from book 2, which is interesting. That they pulled this story they made this part of the show as the book 1 part of it, and had him reading out, which I think is like a better choice. Like I think it's more engaging storytelling to do it that way. We get a date, which is interesting. I don't think we got a date of the actual communication, which is August 15th, 1977. That is the day that Wenjie got the message back from the Trisolarans. I think that was, I don't know, that was interesting. And yeah, we got a lot of discussion, with the conversation. And so I think like the most impactful thing is talking about when Evans is talking about lying, right? And how they don't really understand what lying means. And so there's a couple lines from the show are when they're trying to talk about conversation, and the Sophons are like, well, why, how does the girl not know like that the wolf is not the grandmother? Didn't he just tell her that he's not the grandmother? And he's like, oh no, like, we don't always like speak what we're thinking. And he says like, we are like barnyard animals squawking at each other. And like, there's a book analog to that as well, where I'll read the quote. The quote's a little bit long from a book, but I think it's interesting to kind of refresh your memory on if you haven't read it in a while. And he says, Evan says, what sort of society is it when thought is completely transparent? What sort of culture does it produce? What sort of politics? No scheming, no pretending. The Sophons say, what are scheming and pretending? Evan said nothing. Human communication organs are but an evolutionary deficiency, a necessary compensation for the fact that your brains cannot emit strong thought waves. This is one of your biological weaknesses. Direct display of thought is a superior, more efficient form of communication. A deficiency? A weakness? No, my lord, you are wrong. This time you are totally wrong. Is that so? Let me think about it. It's a shame you cannot see my thoughts. And this leads into talking about there's not a direct analog to the lying thing, but like I think the most powerful, well, one of the most powerful lines in the show is like when the Sophons like fully understand. They go, so the story, it is a lie about a liar, and now they're getting it. They're like, oh, like these people can deceive, and like then they talk about being afraid of humans.
So I also locked onto that scene, Dan. I believe it is stronger. I mean, it's a faithful reproduction. They correctly communicate the Trisolarans understanding this. So I have no qualms with them changing the story, but it is a stronger scene when it comes from the Trisolarans. Like they are actually the ones to originally raise this point, and you get to witness their arrogance, which we know is a barrier to survival. And you also get to witness Evan's devotion in correcting them. And this is, I think, just a few lines before what Dan read, if you'll indulge me to read one more scene from the book. And when the Trisolarans open saying, but it sometimes seems as if your world's missing something. Other times that it has something extra, and we don't know which. What is the area of confusion? We've carefully studied your documents and have discovered that the key to understanding the problem lies in a pair of synonyms. What is the pair of synonyms? Think and say. We've just learned, to our surprise, that they are not, in fact, synonyms. They are not synonyms at all. In our understanding, they ought to be. And I think that getting these incomprehensible responses from the Trisolarans and then realizing that our answers are also equally incomprehensible to them, but then we have such an advantage, and this asymmetric information exchange allows that horror to creep and really plays out more suspense, which is, I think, what typifies the genre of the first book is suspense. It's like you need to figure this out at the same time. Why are they so confused by this? Why have they identified this pair of synonyms? And you watch them get more and more terrified by it.
I also think that this is a really great representation of two very not even different species, but like different beings from different planets trying to understand each other, and the limitations of being able to understand each other when you have been forged from completely different environmental conditions. I think that the irony here is that the very attribute that scares the Trisolarans about humans is the very thing that they will have to latch onto and rely upon to manipulate and control humans, and even more so to form this alliance or enable this alliance between humans who support them, at least up to this point, to manipulate other humans who don't support them or wouldn't support them. So unknowingly, it's this very tendency in humans that they are reliant upon to get their message across, because what is the ETO doing? They are engaging in tactics that are not truthful. Obviously, they're being deceitful. They are keeping secrets from the world. They are manipulating truth. They are feeding it in the form of propaganda to recruit more people to their cause. So this is very much like lies, or humanity's ability to lie is something that the Trisolarans will rely on heavily, but this is the thing that scares them about humans as well. So it's like a double-edged sword in a sense.
I mean, I see your point somewhat, that these are two different, completely alien civilizations grown in different places. But if you can suspend the world that we're living in a little bit and try and access the memories and the tenderness of what it's like to be a child, like quite a young child, and recall if you've ever had a moment where, someone who's not your caregiver, not your parents, but, a trusted person, the version of the grandmother, like an uncle or grandmother might offer you or offer a small child, like, hey, should we have some cookies? And you can say like, oh, I'm actually not allowed to have cookies before dinner. Like, I want to. And then if you've ever had this experience, either as the adult or as the child, say like, well, we could just not tell her. We could just not tell your parents. And if this is really the first time that child has considered it, it is a profound and like earth-defining and earth-shattering moment of like, whoa, I can tell a not. I can tell a not truth. Like that is actually a power that I have. And I think you get very used to it and very deadened to how profound it is because both worlds obviously have rule breakers and people who go against what they're supposed to do. Yeah, is not supposed to send this message. The pacifist is not supposed to respond in the way that dooms his own world. And they can harbor these like dishonest or disobedient thoughts. But it's to the idea of like in communication of them, that's when you would never be able to succeed. And that's something that even humans who love to lie and love to like, there's videos of human toddlers like falling over. And if no one sees them, they'll just pick themselves up. And if someone's watching, they'll like cry and complain. Like we learn to lie super early, but there's a different kind of lying that means like, well, if we were to try and communicate, that's when it would all fall down. And even in book one, they say like in war, sometimes there are disguises, but if they were ever to confront the enemy and be asked a direct question, like that would fall apart. So I thought it was extremely profound in the book and missing a little bit in the show, but I still really like the concept just to think about and think about the different societies that they would form.
Yeah, definitely really, really interesting concepts to think about. Because in everything you said, you just like illustrated that there are so many different forms of dishonesty. It's not like just the outward lie, it's the pretending to be something you're not, or pretending to feel something you don't, or spreading information in a way that is either hyperbolized or underplayed.
Absolutely.
These
And
are
I think
these are all the various forms, and of course, these can be wielded as weapons in the right context or the wrong context.
and they understand that because, book spoilers for The Dark Forest, pretty much the spoiler for The Dark Forest, the reveal of The Dark Forest. The Trisolarans have this deep belief and fear and adherence to the universe being a dark forest. They believe in chains of suspicion. They think that these chains of suspicion cannot be rectified by communication. And I think that they understand that on a cosmic level, the way that you act and what you transmit to the world are not completely one to one. I think it's just this recognition that it exists on this macro and micro scale, that like not only is deception something that sort of exists in the world, but like the person speaking to me right now could be lying. And they could have been lying the entire time I've ever known them. That's what freaks them out so much.
I wanted to talk a little bit about like there's a lot of conversation between Wenjie and Da Shi in these episodes with our. I don't know that we got that much out of the books between with him directly interrogating her, but I thought like these scenes in the show were very interesting and kind of she seems more fanatical in the show than she is in the books. I don't know if you guys got that sense as well. Like she seems to be more religious, for lack of a better word, where she just has like this ultimate belief that they're going to come. Where in the book it's a little bit more nuanced, where she wasn't sure they weren't sure what faction she was part of, and then she eventually like reveals herself to not be an Adventist. And I think I don't know what faction she ends up with, but she's definitely not an Adventist like Evan. So she's not with that group. But here she seems more aligned. But there's no factions either in this one. So I don't know. I got more of like a religious vibe from her in this one. Like at the end of the episode 4, she says like they're coming and you're gonna be so grateful.
And a reminder is that the Adventists are like the purest factions who hardcore hate humanity.
Right, they want the Trisolarans to come here and just wipe everybody out.
Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
most fanatical.
Right. But I mean, Yeonji, like, even in the show, like, she starts out saying, like, come here and conquer us. I'll help you. Or we need to be saved, right? So I don't think she ever wanted to wipe humanity out. She wants humanity to be saved. And I think, like, she thinks that, even in the show, like, that the Trisolaran or the Santee are going to be able to do that. I don't think I think even Evans's faction is also not Adventists. They are redemptionists, I guess. Like because there's the redemptionists, the Adventists, and survivors. And we don't really get any perspective of the
They're like, we're
survivors.
not going to get a Frederick Tyler wall facer mission to see ISIS. I'm starting to feel like it's not even going to happen. They're
We
not even
might.
willing to talk about hatred of humanity.
I don't know. They introduced they no. He sees Al Qaeda. He sees Osama bin
Al
Laden.
Qaeda?
Or yeah, because remember he goes to see Osama bin Laden. Or
Oh,
they don't name him, but like
they do not name him.
you know who it is. But here, like they meant, I know we'll talk about next week. Next week.
Right.
um,
Next.
anyway, but I thought the conversations and like the banter between them, like when Dasher like tells her about Evans, um, and like Evans, and she says, "Oh, Evans didn't even see her, his daughter until she was in the coffin." He's like, and Dasher says, "I thought I was a shit dad." He's like, and she's like, "I'm sure you are."
Yeah.
It's like nice, not nice banter, but like
It's quite a zinger.
yeah, it interesting to watch banter between the two of them.
Yeah, I thought the older Ye Wenjie was kind of very different from the book version because I think in the book version, like for the most part, like she comes across as like a really sweet old lady.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think in this version she is a lot more chilling, but I didn't mind it because I feel like it makes sense given what she has lived through. And for the purposes of the show, I feel like her young self and her older self um, are more in alignment with one another in terms of like personality and like the overall feeling that they give across to the viewer versus in the book how like the young version of her and the older version of her couldn't be more different because in the book when Wang Miao meets her he says that like she seemed like one of those old people who has lived through a lot but then all the hardness has sort of just like left them
Yeah,
as they get
I remember
old.
reading that too.
Yeah. But like, and all that's left is just like this like cute, sweet old person. And then in the book, she's also taking care of, I guess, her neighbor's kids and feeding them.
Yeah, she has like all the children running around soaking the cabbage and telling them about pesticides. She's just a
Yeah.
little Heidi.
Yeah, and she's so jovial and so pleasant with everyone, and she gives like ginseng to Wang Miao. Like she's just sweet old lady, and she is very much not that sweet old lady, and
Yeah.
in the show, but she has her tender moments. Like I felt like the scenes that Saul has with her up to this point and then going forward, she comes across as very soft-hearted when she's talking to him, a bit still a bit creepy, still a bit chilling in how measured her words are, but I felt that that was done very much so on purpose. And I didn't hate it.
But Jin does say like after in episode 5, like when she's talking about her with Augie, she's like she's like the sweet old auntie. She gave me the soup at school, but she doesn't mention her by. She goes like Vera's mom like like gave me like the soup at school and like she's like a sweet old auntie. So I think they don't show it, but yeah, like I get what you're saying. Like she's not shown to have that kind of warmth and compassion that seems like she has in the books, and that's why it's even more surprising in the books when she's revealed as like the leader of the ETO, right? Like, whoa, her. But then of course, it makes sense, right? When you would think about it, but like you just don't suspect it.
I think also that the show didn't so much lean into that suspense because I think that you know, it's revealed pretty early on that she is the same woman, and I think in the book too, that she is the same woman who sent the message to this Trisolarans and kind of doomed all of humanity in the process. So I think that not really leaning into that surprise element that oh my gosh she's the leader of the ETO kind of makes sense. In the show, it's revealed when you see the picture of her younger self the first time Jin visits her and gets the headset from her. I think that I didn't think that difference in personality was so necessary to like still elicit shock that hey, she's gone that far and she's still so much in it.
If I remember right in the books, like we don't know that she sent the message. She tells the people at the assembly about that. Like we get the reveal of her being the leader of the ETO, and then we she tells a story about the time that she got the message and sent it back. Like that. If I remember right, that's how the chapters are spaced out. So like we get the reveal of her before we get the reveal of the message. Like the message happens much later in the show. It's episode 2. It's the end of episode 2. So like we know that that's the same character and that she sent that message. So like I guess that's why it's not quite as surprising. But in
You're probably right. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that the book kind of breaks it up before she sends the message, possibly,
yeah,
right?
because
Yeah.
I think like yeah she's revealed as the leader, and then she tells a story about like how the aliens got in contact with her, and then she gets arrested, and then they tell the story about her killing the people, right? Because like I think Dasher is like people think he murdered people. He's like, oh yeah, I did, and then she tells a story about like how she cut the rope for Yang and Lei. Um, yeah,
Also, the father of her daughter is not Evans in the book, correct?
right. Yeah, it's Yang because
Yeah. Yes.
it's her daughter Yang Dong, and so like the
Right.
father, yeah,
Yes.
Yang Weiding. Oh, and I'm okay with that change too. Like whatever, like they streamlined it a little bit and had the
Yeah,
just Evans, yeah,
ultimately, both in the book and in the show, the father is very much not in the picture. So
right,
I think the changes that they made were it sort of made sense for it to be the person Evans who is still in the picture as far as the conflict goes, as far as the ETO goes. So yeah, I think I actually found myself like quite impressed by the little minor things that they changed to better serve the plot line that they were going with, like something that Talia mentioned last week, which was like a quick brief exchange between Jin and Augie at the funeral where she says, did you talk to the neurologist? Did you talk to the eye doctor? Like little things like that that they threw in there, little things they tweaked. I think it just kind of lends itself to the plot remaining tight, and that is something that I very much appreciated. Like you can tell the thought that went into making sure that things line up the way that they should.
yeah, and like that was sort of the point I was trying to get at with like the things that are missing from the show. Like I notice all of them as a book reader, but like I don't miss them, and I understand like they're in the service of a tighter, like more cohesive narrative that like we get to the important things, right? So one, I don't miss them, and two, I think like they know that they cut them, but like they're doing a service to the book, and they every the more I watch the show, the more I understand like how much they appreciate and like really like these books and like want to make them as good as they can and be reverent to the source material, and I think they are.
Agreed. That is a sensation I have that grows the more I watch.
And I think like next week will be even more. I'm so excited about talking about next. I think yeah.
Agreed. So much payoff.
But let's get through this episode. I mean, I'm not get through it, but like let's keep talking about it because there's also a lot of stuff here. I don't want to like short because like episode 5 is the big set piece, and I think that the one that people are gonna if you're gonna watch the show and you get to episode 5 and you're not into it after episode 5, like you're probably not gonna get into it. But I think a lot of people who get to that point will. And the nice thing is that it's like it's only 5 episodes where in the book it's like 30 chapters before you understand there's aliens, right?
I also wanted to throw in there because we were talking about whether this will appeal to non-book readers and people who are not. And then the question came up like, okay, but will it appeal to people who are not generally into sci-fi? And I am pleased to report that my sister-in-law was kind of roped into watching it by my brother-in-law who did read the books. And she is very much not a sci-fi reader or a reader. And she doesn't I don't think she watches sci-fi shows or movies. And she very, very much did enjoy the show, and she got through it. And she said, like, she's so curious now to find out what happens. So I was like, you could try reading the books because they're really good. But I think that someone like her would be deterred by the way book one is written. But yeah, it was very interesting that she was super into the show despite not being one to gravitate towards that genre.
Yeah, and also like when you recommend the books, like whenever I recommend the books to people, I always had like think of like, oh man, but you have to get through this scene, and like, you have to get through chapters of Wang Miao going to the optometrist, and like a lot of like extra stuff that happens in there, and like readouts of how like solar communication works. Like maybe you're into it, maybe if you're a casual science fiction reader, like you're not gonna be into that. And then, getting into book two, you have the whole imaginary girlfriend part you have to get past. And it's like, all right, but come on. If you get past that, it's so great right after that.
So true.
They better not do that to Saul season two. They better not.
I bet they're going to skip it. They've skipped anything.
Yeah. If they're going to skip some of this other stuff, like that is like really ready. That's ready to be skipped. That whole thing.
If they rush the Sophon scene and devote imaginary girlfriend time, they deserve strongly worded letters.
Although I feel like props to them if they find a way to incorporate it into the narrative in a way that isn't cheesy, and like, let's say if Saul ends up with somebody he actually cares about, and then that person ends up being taken away from him, and so that he can focus. I can see that. I can see myself appreciating that, because then the stakes of something have been like raised for him in that sense. Like and then he has been shown to be a character who kind of flees from emotional attachments of that sort. So without all the imaginary stuff, if someone actually came into his life and then he lost them and then had to, get his shit together, I would appreciate that.
I think it'll be Augie though, right? Because like they already kind of set that up that like they're sort of, have some kind of relationship that.
It could have just been that girl that he was with, who, which we will see in later episodes, of course. A particular woman he was with briefly before a certain event happened. Yeah. That could be the extent of that, like the impact that what happens to her will have on him. So
bird straight, maybe.
Yes.
I hope we get a very hedonistic Saul.
We can only hope.
We'll see. We can only hope. We can only hope.
One thing I was kind of surprised to find I've done a lot of like looking at Reddit and YouTube videos and stuff, is like people aren't making, even book readers aren't putting the connection between Raj and Zhang Beihai together. Like it seems really obvious to me, and then maybe it's because I knew ahead of time. But like when he, in this episode, in episode 5, like starts out with like Wade going to him and in front of a big ship and talking, and then asking him about the ship, and then Raj saying, "Oh, eventually he says like, oh, it's not built for, it's a waste of money. It's like not built for asymmetrical warfare." Like that's exactly what Zhang Beihai said about like the ship in Dark Forest. So like I don't know like how people are kind of putting that together.
I've seen the same thing on Twitter. Like people are missing that point and saying like, "Oh, we hate that this is a created character." I'm like, "Did you read the books?"
Yeah, because and then like and later on like and he joins the Space Force, and it's like he's gonna go to the moon, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what Zhang Beihai does, right? like this is his character, like exactly. He's a military guy. It seems very obvious to me.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. You can't judge the strength of a show by how much people on Reddit and Twitter understand it.
Yeah, it's just like it just strikes me as strange that like people who have read the books like don't make that. It's like the less prevalent that like people aren't making the connection that Will is Yin Tian Ming, but it's like also super obvious. Like hopefully if they've seen the entire show, and then it's very obvious.
Oh, I thought they got that. But
I think they do, but like I've seen people who've not got that as well. Or like, was he really Yin Tian Ming? It's like, no, it's him. Right? Like it's 100% him.
Maybe after episode 1, you're not sure. I think by by episode 8 should be very
yeah, it should be pretty obvious.
I mean, how is it not obvious the moment he gets like his terminal diagnosis? Like this is our guy.
I know. Like I don't get it either, but I've seen, yeah, I've seen comments.
Oh man, this is probably not the place for it. I can skip it if need be, but I do kind of miss how everything seemed to fall into place for Yun Tianming with the passage of euthanasia laws. I thought that was like,
Oh yeah.
well, I liked that aspect in
Well,
that
then
sense.
it didn't fall
felt-
into place. Chengxin
Sorry?
passed the law for him to be able to, because like remember Chengxin like breaks into the room and says like we passed the euthanasia law for you.
Yes, she does say for you, but it's now reduced to Wade saying like, and we need someone who's a friend of yours who knows physics and maybe is a physics professor and is dying.
Yeah.
Anyone know anyone like that? Like
Right.
it doesn't really lead to any like long-term project that gets payoff. Whereas when you realize that they had to pass euthanasia laws, it's the same as like, no, they believed in something and they fought for it and they lobbied and passed this law. And then they pitched the staircase project and they believed in it and lobbied for it and it was turned down. And so they had to change tactics and show that it had value to the Trisolarians would pick it up, and that's why it had value. It wasn't just a vanity project, and then they get it approved. Like it's just so much more work that's put in the books and
Yeah.
everything. That's what I mean. Like sort of just seems like it falls into place in the movie, in the TV show. Pardon me, but
Yeah.
these are things that we do in service of the plot, so I do understand it.
Okay, well, I think we talked a lot about the Sophon Creation scene already. There was one Easter egg that I think Talia both and I both noticed or had noticed for it. I saw it online somewhere where the file that the 100 petabyte file that was on the hard drive had an extension of .cxl, which is supposed to be. I mean, I don't know. There's a theory that it's like it's referencing Cixin Liu. Which is like CXL.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, hopefully it's a nod to him.
It's a nod. Yeah, I think that's all it needs to be.
I'm hoping he gets a cameo at some point in the show. Like that'd be awesome. But
Really? Oh, that would be cool. I hadn't even considered that.
apparently, they approached Barack Obama and he said no, which is unfortunate. But
I saw Biden on the screen, so I know that there's world leaders in fair use policy. I don't know if we're going to get any.
no, I saw like a interview with them, and they specifically said like we asked Obama, and he said no.
It's funny because he is the reason that this is such a popular book.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so that would be cool. But
Was the book on one of his reading lists or something?
Yeah, and all the books like all
Ah.
the softcover books like have a quote from him on the front of
this
it.
book because of Barack
Now I
Obama.
remember. Yes,
Yeah.
I remember that. The paperbacks do. That's true.
I think we've talked about just general pacing of the show, but I mean, in general, do you guys think it's like how do you think about the pacing? Like me personally, I think like pacing is good. Like I've said a bunch of times, like they've cut out a bunch of stuff and like they simplified things, but I think it's all in the service is like a more watchable plot. Like having watched the Chinese one and this one, like this one is far superior and maybe even superior to the books in some aspects, right? Like sometimes we get a lot more context in the books, obviously, but like
In some aspects, it is stronger than the books. Yeah, 100%.
yeah, like it's the book is can be a slog to get through at times, right? Like even me who's like read this book like a bunch of times and like super into it, like you think about some parts and they're like, oh man, it just takes a long time to get where you want to go, right? But here it's like it moves at a fast clip. It gets the story across. It gets the important parts across. It does.
I
Yeah.
just know that the payoff, like we have this questioning between Clarence and yeah reveals a bunch of things, but it's literally like at the first questioning, it's like, oh well, now that you asked, here's everything. Whereas I thought it was just like I like the pacing in the book of the ETO member laughing and saying, yeah, they sent 2 protons. And then you, the book reader, or you, the TV audience watcher, is like, well, perfect. They can't do anything. Like, how could they possibly impact us with 2 protons? And here in the TV show, it's like, oh, this is a Sophon. It's an omniscient, tiny, multi-dimensional computer that also happens to be a proton. So there's no like chance for human arrogance to be like, oh, okay, it's only a proton, and then have that reveal. So it's sort of like robbed us of that because they start with like the maximum force. So that's my complaint with pacing. There's no sense of suspense. But I do really like the things they do in service of the plot, and I'll have more to say about that in the next episode because I think there's some really clever things that they do that the book should have done. So one of the quotes that I found from other people who have watched this is first 5 episodes were terrific, but then it turned into boring. I love you, but am an underdeveloped character despite the size of my brain, and I can't express myself. And pretty much lost the plot. I blame Brad, so I can link that episode. I thought that was such a funny comment because I honestly couldn't tell which character they were talking about. That could easily be Raj. That could easily be Jin. That could easily be Will. That could easily be Augie. I think it has some truth to it. In terms of like the love plots being shoehorned. But I'm curious if either of you agree about that subject. Like first 5 episodes were terrific, but
I wholly disagree. I think the last 3 episodes are the best of the show. Like I enjoyed those more than the first 5. Maybe it's because I like book 2 and 3 more than book 1.
I think everyone does. Someone is wrong on the internet, basically. But,
and just to be clear, when they say Brad, I'm guessing Brad Pitt because he's an executive producer on the show.
Oh, is that what they meant?
I'm guessing.
Cool.
Like, yeah, I'm guessing like they're blaming him because he's a high profile.
I definitely preferred episodes 6, 7, and 8 to the rest as well.
And I think it's specifically because they developed the characters, right? Like the characters are way more developed and you're more emotionally invested in them, than any time. I mean, maybe not any time in the books. Like the only time I was like fully invested in the characters, like emotionally, was like when Cheng Xin sees Yan Tianming for the first time. Like that's like that. I think that's the emotional high point of the series for me. Yeah. And then having that relationship set up ahead of time, like even like the scene in this part where Jin and Will are talking when she's in the ambulance and Will is like talking to her, just kind of like he's like, wait, are you driving? And she's like, something happened. And he's like, where are you? And she's like, and I think he's like, are you safe? And he's like, well, I'm going somewhere it's going to be safe. And he's like, I'll come get you. Wherever you are, I'll come get you. And so like you just see their friendship, and like he also like looks at the fairy tales book at that point, and like there's like a little nice note from Jin in there, saying like happy birthday or whatever, and like of course that's like foreshadowing for my favorite part of the books for future seasons.
I am chuckling. I don't remember if it was this episode or the next one, so apologies if this is the next episode, but I think there's even a character moment in Will's like, yeah, you gave me this 2 days after my birthday. It's like there's affection, but she's also like, slipped a little bit on the date, and he remembers that. And I thought that's like a funny moment too.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you, Dan. I think that one of the things that I think I might have also mentioned in our previous recording is that I think that what works particularly well in this series is that we see characterization and character development through the relationships that these characters have towards each other. And even in terms of books that I read, I feel like I'm always looking for what I think of as like anchoring characters who anchor one another and also anchor the emotional heart of the story. And I think that the show gives that to us more so than the books, because at least as far as the scope of this season goes, it's only I would say maybe like all of book 1 and maybe like a quarter of book 2 that we're getting. And I think that we've already gotten so much more out of the characters than we get from any of the characters that span across the books or parts of books that we are focusing on this season. So I disagree with the underdeveloped characters thing, because especially within a fast-paced show like this, where you're also dealing with such a high-level scientific concept, there's often very little opportunity to focus on the characters in the way that this show has taken care to do. So, I had just been applauding the efforts in writing the characters the way that they've been written. So, um, wholeheartedly disagree with that claim.
All right, I think our final topic is we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think Tatiana, we want to speak about her. She's absent for a lot of episode 5, but she shows up at the end. I think, but she's also an important part of episode 4. Her being at the, her welcoming Jin into the organization. I think like her moment of when Jin first speaks to her at the thing, and she calls out like, it's kind of weird that we call him our lord. It sounds weird, but like you'll get used to it. I thought that was good. She is very strong.
Hey, this is true that it lends itself to Dan's conspiracy theories about Tatiana from last week, because this comment is funny. She's a wall breaker for sure. I don't know about wall breaker, but she's definitely a glass breaker.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a cynic. I'm here thinking this is bad writing. I think that they showed her breaking glass that shouldn't have been able to break, and that's, bad writing. But maybe she has some kind of superpower or some mystery around her. We'll see.
Yeah, I still don't really fully understand how that happened. Like,
I don't understand why no one else is interested in it.
Yeah, I mean,
she doesn't show up on CCTV anyway.
Okay, well that's one thing.
For all the punches that Jack threw in the VR game, like he did not even try to fight a little bit to survive in real life. So that was a little bit sus to me.
Yeah, it's very sus.
But like, it's one thing like the Sophons could remove her from all the footage, right? Like they could go through and like edit like digital copies of the video and remove her, right? And I think they show as much, like when she's leaving, they show her on the video.
They're
and it kind of like disappears, right? But like, how is it that like Da Shi looking through binoculars at the window doesn't see a break?
Doesn't see or hear it, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that they're giving the Sophons too much power, because if anything is like projecting sound, that's still being heard by other humans, right? Like, stuff that's happening on the inside of your corneas, sure, I'll give you that. But sound travels.
Unless it's not the Sophons, right? Unless like she is really something outworldly.
How many aliens are there?
I don't know. There's a billions, right?
Yeah, true.
So my interpretation of that scene was simply that I thought that from where Da Shi was like sitting outside in his car, he simply wasn't facing the room in which this murder took place.
No,
that was
he was
what
like,
I thought.
He was like looking at the room with binoculars.
Was that the particular room that they were in? That he was looking at.
Yeah, it's like in the corner.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
I know. I don't get it. Like, I don't know like how the Sophons would be able to hide that.
He had to have, okay, so like the Sophons can scrub the video feed, but if he's looking directly into the room, he should be able to see her.
Right, yeah. I can see if he like they obscured his vision or something, right? Like if his vision went black when that happened, right? And that's like one thing. Like I can see that happening. But like actually removing it, and like he just sees like the room, like the empty room when he looks at binoculars.
But whenever the Sophons are messing with somebody's vision, they see a distortion, and then they know they're seeing something that they're not supposed to be seeing, or a distortion. He would obviously, as perceptive as he is, know if his vision had been distorted in some way for him to not see that. So I don't even think that's the angle that they were going for. That's why my brain automatically like filled in the explanation that maybe he's not looking at the room that this is taking place in. But
more Dasha slander. He's not being shown as brilliant as he is.
Yeah.
He's just blind to reality.
I mean, I kind of hope we get it. I hope we get an explanation later on.
Me too.
I mean, I'm guessing we will. Like, there's more going on at Tatiana than we've seen so far. I know it. I'm positive about it. I don't know what it is, but like, there's more going on. So I think with that, we will wrap it up. We obviously have a lot more to talk about next week. with the episodes coming up, and I'm excited to do so. But thank you for listening. Please check out rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, pronunciation guides, and all the other stuff we put up there, and all the redesign stuff that I spent all weekend doing. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Twitter at RehydratePod, and on Mastodon at rehydrate@mast.to. And please join us next episode for Season 9, Episode 3, The Stars Are Destination, covering episodes 6, 7, and 8 of The Three-Body Problem.